وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning, Michigan. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Good day, everybody. President Trump proposes to turn the Gaza Strip into a Middle East Riviera, except for one thing. There will be no Palestinians in Gaza to enjoy it. The Gaza Palestinians will be resettled in some other country, including Jordan and Egypt. In the 1990s, the U.S. bombed Serbia to stop ethnic cleansing of Bosnia and Kosovo. Today, Mr. Trump wants to cleanse Gaza of its population regardless of international and American laws. To discuss the implications of Mr. Trump's plan, we have two distinguished guests and experts. We have Ms. Huwaida Arraf, who is a Palestinian-American civil rights attorney, and we also have Professor Brad Roth of Wayne State University. Before we get started, I have a program note. We are coming to you not just on radio, but also in video. So go to the Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio and follow us on the Zoom link there. Again, Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio, and let's get started. My first question is for both guests, and let's start with Ms. Arraf. What's your initial reaction to Mr. Trump's plan?
Well, I think like most people, I think it's absolutely ludicrous. But not only that, I also believe it's very dangerous because this plan, its very suggestion, is a serious violation of Palestinian human rights. It is considered a war crime under the Geneva Conventions and also under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. And if committed, as it would be, because we have seen and continue to see the Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, it would constitute a crime against humanity because it would be committed in the context of this systematic attack on a civilian population. So it is dangerous because the president of the United States, the most powerful nation in the world, is essentially trying to normalize war crimes and crimes against humanity. And we know in the actions of the United States in supporting Israel, it has essentially been doing that, but to blurt it out and to present it to the world as something that is actually favorable, it is dangerous, and we must not at all, even if his administration now is trying to walk back certain things, we must not let up on our insistence that this is absolutely ludicrous, will not happen, and it would be a war crime and crime against humanity, and the whole world must stand up against it. In addition to that, there are other things that we can talk about. I think it would be politically not feasible, but also Palestinians would never accept it. It would not even be practical. And as we've seen just last week with when the ceasefire went in, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returning to the north, areas that they had been displaced from, in the, not even with vehicles. Most of them were walking, hundreds of thousands, old and young, people older than the state of Israel itself on their canes, walking back to their, knowing that they don't even have homes to go back to, but rubble, and yet insisting that this is our land. And even if we are sitting on top of the rubble of our homes, we are staying. And certainly we heard the response of the Palestinian people and the response of certainly Palestinians from Gaza saying, no way, it will not happen. And that is not to say that we don't want the United States to help. And certainly the United States needs to participate in the rebuilding of Gaza. The United States needs to pay for it. Trump said, he will take over Gaza, but of course, he doesn't want to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. He only wants to pay, or knows that the United States has paid for the complete obliteration of Gaza. So the United States does owe an obligation to pay for the reconstruction of Gaza, but the Gazan people, the Palestinian people, must be in control. They must participate, and in Trump's plan, there is nothing of that. It is in discussion with the occupier and the genocider sitting and standing right next to him, Israeli Prime Minister, wanted war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu, that he is proposing to further complete the total ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. It is absolutely ludicrous.
Professor Roth, the same question.
Well, I agree with everything that Huwaida Arraf has just said. I think, though, it's probably more important to focus on the atmospherics because, first of all, there's no practical possibility of doing this. Partly because the states that would have to cooperate with that plan have absolutely no disposition to cooperate, partly because Palestinians will not cooperate, partly because it's simply impractical, and partly because the Trump administration has no interest in committing the resources to make it happen anyway. So I think one ought to see it in other terms as part and parcel of the strategy of demonstrating that there are no rules that constrain this administration. And you see this at every level in terms of international law, in terms of domestic law. All of these acts are performative, very much like saying he's going to take Greenland and dressing down the Prime Minister of Denmark on the telephone, very much like threatening the tariffs against Canada, very much like threatening to seize the Panama Canal. Everyone knows that these things are blatant violations of international law. That's the point. And so similarly, with respect to what he's doing domestically, they just an extraordinary assault on the foundations of the administrative state. And there is some sense that he was, he sold himself as someone who would not subject himself to existing norms, that someone who was willing to break all the rules, and also as someone who stood up for the idea that America was being taken advantage of in the world, that our allies in the world were actually people who were freeloaders off of us. And here, we've got someone who is willing to take a stand for essentially a more selfish foreign policy. So this is the kind of context in which this is all taking place. So I think that the real issue here is not so much the practicality of what he's proposing, but rather what it communicates about the utter contempt for the Palestinians, utter contempt for human rights standards in general. And that, of course, augurs all of the worst concrete policies that will eventually come down the road. But this is not a policy that will happen.
Ms. Arraf, in the past, in his first term, Mr. Trump gave Israel Jerusalem for nothing in return. But you say that the Palestinians shouldn't let anything like that happen. What can they do?
Well, the Palestinians, I mean, when you look at the situation, of course, militarily and politically, they are at a severe disadvantage. They are up against a nuclear power that has been trying for decades to get rid of them because it has colonized their land and seeks to replace them. And then it has been backed up by the United States, which has served not only to help Israel militarily and economically, but has served to shield Israel from any kind of accountability. And even just yesterday, we saw Trump sign an executive order that is penalizing the International Criminal Court and anyone working on any kind of investigation of the United States and its allies. Of course, this is to serve Israel. It should be said that that executive order in itself is a violation of the Rome Statute, which allows the International Criminal Court to go after anyone that seeks to interfere with the work of the court. And the prosecutor, Karim Khan, had said when he put in the applications for the arrest warrant of Netanyahu and the former Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, that he would not hesitate to use his authority under Article 70 of the Rome Statute to go after those who try to interfere or obstruct the work of the court. And I would call on him to actually do that. It doesn't matter that the United States is not a party to the Rome Statute and not a member of the International Criminal Court, because the crimes that are being committed are committed on territory that the court does have jurisdiction over. And therefore, anyone trying to interfere with that work can come under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. And I would say enough of not only Israeli impunity, but U.S. impunity. And if the court would actually be strong and bold enough and actually respect the rule of law, then it would start to warn the United States that it is not above the law and it is not removed from the ICC's jurisdiction. And if the ICC actually issues an arrest warrant for U.S. officials, then it will become a lot more difficult for U.S. officials to travel. Of course, I know the political implications there, and it goes back to what the Palestinians can do, because the Palestinians have allies, of course, all over the world. On the governmental level, most of the world stands with Palestine, but it is because the United States is such a big bully and shields Israel from international accountability, not only with the Security Council of the United Nations, but also in pressuring individual countries to restrain themselves from penalizing Israel, from boycotting or divesting from Israel, even though we have seen some countries start to do that. And I think that we need to build on that Palestinian steadfastness, sumud, in continuing to say we will not settle for anything less than our rights, is a great instigator and of global action and a great moral compass, I think, for the rest of the world. So the Palestinians need to hold fast, as they have done. Really, they have been leading all of us in insisting on their human rights and nothing less, and not just human rights, but also political rights, which includes their complete liberation, and call on the rest of the world to not let up with their actions to isolate Israel. And we are seeing more and more of that. So a last point on this, which I think is very important, in terms of Trump's proposal vis-a-vis taking control of Gaza and resettling the Palestinians, as obnoxious as it is, I'm afraid it might have actually a strategic point to it. And we saw in Trump's first administration in 2020, he was announcing that Israel is going to annex large swaths of the West Bank. And there was international outcry. And then what happened? He signed the Abraham Accords with the United Arab Emirates, and the United Arab Emirates was able to say that we stopped the annexation of the West Bank in exchange for the Abraham Accords and these relations with Israel. And I'm afraid this could be used in much the same way. Although we saw Saudi Arabia come out immediately and reject the resettlement or the forced expulsion of the Palestinian people, and insisted that normalization with Israel is dependent on the establishment of a Palestinian state. We don't want a situation where Saudi Arabia and Trump, the United States, will be able to move ahead with normalization and be able to say that we stop the forced expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza in exchange for this deal. So I worry that unfortunately about the steadfastness and the principles of what the countries that should be Palestinian and stronger Palestinian allies, and that is the Arab and Muslim world. They should not be moving forward with any kind of normalization with Israel. And sadly, I am horrified that the ones that did sign agreements with Israel and are part of these Abraham Accords have not completely rejected and rescinded these accords, because they are intended to isolate Palestinians, and Palestinians need more international solidarity. And of course, first and foremost, this should come from their Arab and Muslim brethren in the Arab and Muslim world.
When we come back after a short break, we will resume the discussion, and I will ask Professor Roth about the ideal formula for rebuilding Gaza. I mean, Ms. Arraf said that the U.S. needs to take part in rebuilding. Some other people would say, well, they also need to pay compensations for the Gazan people, for the Palestinians in Gaza. But we will discuss that after the break.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most. And make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
Behind the scenes, Michigan's public health team is working to make Michiganders across the state healthier, bringing healthcare closer to home with mobile clinics, increasing access to healthy food through farmers markets and WIC, doing hearing and vision screenings in schools, helping families navigate healthcare challenges. Learn more about how public health workers protect us all at michigan.gov/public health. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Every year in Michigan, approximately 3,000 people die of drug overdose. Today's drugs are more addictive and deadlier than ever before. Most street opioids tested contain a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. Drug overdoses are preventable. Keep naloxone on hand. Together, we can change the statistics. Learn how to save lives at michigan.gov/SUD. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing Mr. Trump's plan in Gaza. Mr. Trump says that the U.S. will own and will clean and will resettle the entire population of Gaza. Professor Roth, what is the ideal formula for U.S. contribution here? I mean, should it be an international reconstruction or U.S. just playing its role by itself?
Well, first of all, it's ironic to be having this conversation at all at a moment when the administration has now unveiled plans to fire almost all of the 10,000 employees of the U.S. Agency for International Development. So it's clear that the Trump administration has no serious interest in getting involved in actual humanitarian operations on the ground. And in any event, one would not want to see the United States be in control of these matters, both for reasons of the self-interest of the United States and for the reasons of the untrustworthiness of the United States' role in this process. One would certainly want to see an internationalized process. The enormity of this task is just so daunting. There are estimates that this could take 15 to 20 years. We're talking about a part of the world where well over a majority of the buildings have been destroyed or damaged. We have a situation where there's, as Trump himself pointed out, oddly enough, unexploded ordnance. We have, all kinds of toxins as a result of all of this. So the task ahead is absolutely remarkable. And it could only be performed with international cooperation from all quarters. And again, the United States is pulling the plug on so many things. It just announced withdrawing from the World Health Organization, of which it contributes 15% of the budget. So it's hard to see where the resources come from. It's hard to see how this is going to proceed. Prior to any idea about the reconstruction, though, there needs to be some notion of political reconstruction. And the first thing that has to happen is Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. How is that engineered? It's certainly not going to be a product of U.S. pressure on the Israelis. Hard enough to see the Israelis actually following through with phases 2 and 3 of the existing agreement. But clearly, this is a matter of Palestinian self-determination. The acknowledged government of the Palestinian territories is, in fact, the Palestinian Authority, although it certainly needs to have its legitimacy among Palestinians refreshed as well. But in any event, one would like to see elections take place. One would like to see a government that was more clearly by consent of the people governed in the territory. But you can't even think about how to do that in a situation where people don't have homes, where people don't have even the rudiments of life at the moment to begin to construct their society in a political way. So, I think in any event, the Palestinian Authority is the crucial player in terms of our demands at this point for it to be, sort of setting the terms of what's to go forward, because there's no one else that has even a trace of legitimacy to do so.
Ms. Arraf, go ahead.
Professor Roth said something very important, and that is with regard to the ability for Palestinians to really do much when they don't have any homes. They don't have the basic necessities of life. Gaza before October 7th, 2023 was unlivable because of the lack of potable water and other things. And now it has been almost entirely obliterated. So practically speaking, Palestinians need to have the necessities of life. So maybe they do need to go somewhere, right? But they should not be taken out of the boundaries of historic Palestine. And the first place we should be looking for Palestinians of Gaza to be able to go until Gaza is rebuilt and see if they want to go back to their homes in Gaza is their original homes that they were kicked out of in 48. So while practically speaking, they do need the necessities of life. I mean, children now are sleeping out in the open air, barely any tents, and it is cold, it is rainy, it is windy. This is not practical. They don't have running water and electricity or many other things. But we should be looking for Palestinians and insisting that Palestinians should have a right to go back to the towns and villages that they were kicked out of, or other places within historic Palestine. So that needs to be said. If we are looking for practically resettling anywhere, it needs to be within historic Palestine and preferably to the towns and villages they were kicked out of. But another point is, I did say that the United States owes an obligation to Palestinians to help and to finance the rebuilding under Palestinian direction. Israel also has an obligation to finance and to pay for reconstruction of Gaza. It illegally obliterated Gaza. It is, I believe, in the International Court of Justice in due time, will be found guilty of genocide. And therefore, as we continue to put pressure on our governments to hold Israel accountable, it also needs to be not only Israel's leaders holding them criminally responsible, but also the state to hold it financially responsible and in other ways. And this is with paying for the rebuilding of Gaza and reparations, as you said, to the people of Gaza. And the International Court of Justice actually already said that this needs to happen. In July 19 of 2024, they issued a very important advisory opinion. But it is advisory, not to say that it is not binding. It is advisory only because it was issued in the context of a request for clarity on what the law is, and not in the context of a dispute between two nations. But the International Court of Justice found that Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, including East Jerusalem, all of that territory is absolutely illegal. And not only must Israel give up and withdraw as soon as possible, and the UN passed a resolution to say that it should be done within the next year, a year from last summer. But also that Palestinians need to be paid reparations for all they have lost in these decades that Israel has stolen, that has colonized their land, stolen their land and resources. So not only in the context of the genocide and rebuilding Gaza, we must also continue to insist that Israel be held accountable for all it has done to Palestinians over the last 8 decades.
Professor Roth, what do you expect Mr. Trump to do to Egypt and Jordan, both of which have rejected his idea?
Well, who knows? He's obviously engaged in bullying of all sorts of people around the world just for the heck of it. I, again, don't really think that in the final analysis he's going to be very serious about all of this. The Egyptians and the Jordanians have multiple reasons for turning him down, no matter what sort of bluster he engages in here. And so, rather than embarrass himself further, he probably would not pursue any serious measures against them. But who knows? I want to underscore something that Huwaida said about reparation, which is that one thing to note in terms of the laws of state responsibility is that the United States, by virtue of having been complicit in the actions in the Gaza Strip, is clearly chargeable, although there's not a forum in which it can be charged. It's understood in international law that the United States has a burden of responsibility in respect of the reconstruction as well. I would also point out in respect of the genocide issue that unfortunately the International Court of Justice's jurisdiction over the question of the conflict in Gaza is limited by the terms of the Genocide Convention itself, because it's the only basis upon which Israel has consented to be sued in the ICJ. And therefore, you have a standard that represents a very high bar. It's very difficult to establish that there has been genocide. Bosnia sued Serbia for genocide, and only a particular subset of the conduct that occurred during that war was deemed to qualify under the genocide standard. The problem is that war crimes and crimes against humanity, which are much easier to prove, are simply not within the jurisdiction of the court in that contentious jurisdiction. Of course, it's also true that the International Court of Justice, in addition to having the authority under the UN Charter to obligate specifically states to adhere to their judgments, also is the best authority that we have available in the international system for articulating what the law is and how it applies. And that's the significance of the advisory opinion on other aspects of the occupation. That even though it is a non-binding opinion, it doesn't have the force of Article 94 of the UN Charter. It nonetheless represents the most authoritative judgment available about how international law applies to the Israeli occupation. And this does have implications, as Huwaida says, for reparation as well as for the withdrawal of Israelis from the territory.
We are going to take another quick break. When we come back, I want to know from Ms. Arraf whether to expect Mr. Trump to retreat from his idea given the universal rejection of his plan after the break.
Michigan's winter forecast is snow, snow, and more snow. And for a little variety, ice. Since that means slippery roads, stay safe by following these driving tips. Don't use cruise control on ice and snow. Use turn signals sooner to give others more time to react. Keep your car's fluids, tires, and wipers well maintained. And most important of all, drive slow on ice and snow. A message from the Michigan Office of Highway Safety Planning.
With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American board-certified Dr. Nicholas Shama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing Mr. Trump's Gaza plan. Ms. Arraf, Mr. Trump is quick to make decisions and then to retreat. Example, his tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Do you expect a retreat given the universal rejection of his plan?
I don't expect Trump to admit that his plan is impractical or that it's wrong in any way, because he does, make these grandiose, largely improbable proposals, and then, continues to insist that they're the best proposals that anyone has ever heard, but then might move on to other things. I think there are different ways to look at why he might have made this proposal when he did and in this way. And one of the theories being that he needed to give Netanyahu some support within his own coalition, because Netanyahu's right-wing coalition and even ministers that have left the government are foaming at the mouth to get back to bombing Gaza. And they were not happy with the ceasefire deal. And therefore, by making a proposal like this, could help Netanyahu kind of maintain his coalition by saying that the United States is going to get actively involved in a plan to really get rid of the Palestinians. And we saw that polls showing or reporting that at least 70% of Israelis approved of Trump's plan, and Netanyahu, the right wing in Netanyahu's government, also approved very much of the plan. But one thing also that I think needs to be said is what has been said about Gaza, and another reason why he might have made this preposterous proposal is to detract from what's been happening in the West Bank and what might come from the West Bank. The situation there is horrific. We have had over the last year and a half close to 1,000 Palestinians killed, thousands more. We don't even know how many are imprisoned in Israel's dungeons. And Israel has started carrying out operations in Tulkarem and in Jenin, and it is estimated that at least 26,000 Palestinians have been forcibly displaced from the Jenin refugee camps and from parts of Tulkarem. And certainly we know that Israel is more interested in taking over all of the West Bank. There are thoughts that this was also promised to Netanyahu in exchange for a ceasefire that the United States would support or not object to Israel annexing all of the West Bank, which of course would be illegal. We know it's illegal under various international treaties, but also the International Court of Justice, as I mentioned in its July 2024 opinion, clearly laid out that this occupation is illegal and must end as soon as practicably possible. And not only did the ICJ say that Israel must end its occupation, but it said that international institutions and that states have an obligation pressure Israel to end the occupation. So any kind of ruling by the United States, and Trump did say that he was asked about the West Bank, and he said he wouldn't comment on the West Bank now, but indicated that he might actually recognize Israel's annexation and claim over all of this occupied territory. And certainly that is illegal, that is dangerous, but sadly, it is not very different from what has been happening. The West Bank, Gaza, has, for almost all practical intents and purposes, has been annexed. Palestinians have been fighting to stay on their land, but Israel has been encroaching. Israel controls everything. But again, we must not normalize, we must not allow these blatant declarations of actions that violate international law to become accepted in any way. So will he retreat? It is hard to know. Again, he will not admit that he was wrong in any way or that his plan is impracticable, because nobody will accept it. But we must watch out for these other things that I mentioned. And I do also want to emphasize that whether or not he will retreat or stop pushing, let's say, it is also contingent on how strong the Arab world, Jordan, Egypt, certainly Saudi Arabia, will stand in saying that this is not going to happen. We will not accept it. We will not accept resettlement facility in any way, and use the powers that are at their disposal to really stand up for Palestinians. So I'm also looking to the Arab world not to succumb to Trump's bullying or any kind of pressure that he might put on these states to accept his plan.
Professor Roth, Mr. Trump's aim is to get Saudi Arabia to normalize with Israel. Saudi Arabia says no normalization without establishing a Palestinian state. How does the recent development affect U.S.-Saudi relations?
Well, it seems extraordinarily improbable that Saudi Arabia will go ahead and open full diplomatic relations with Israel under these kinds of circumstances. I think, though, that what Trump is trying to do is what he's trying to do everywhere, which is to angle for some sort of deal, and he's going to be able to say that because of his opening gambit, he was able to extract something that he would not otherwise have extracted, and that's what makes him a great deal maker. And the fact that he's utterly unconstrained by the rules will furnish the foundation for that. The problem with the Trump administration is that it is entirely transactional and unstable, and its transactionalism is based on what personally benefits Donald Trump and people around him, rather than any grander strategic vision. So my guess is that we will sort of stay in relatively the same place that we've been in terms of actual diplomacy between Arab states and Israel. But I think that you will see some kinds of probably cosmetic acts on the part of those who seek to placate Donald Trump. Just because they know that by placating him, they can gain some ground, but they're not going to be willing to make the kinds of destabilizing moves that Trump might desire for them to engage in, given how poisonous the reputation of Israel and Netanyahu are at this moment among the political constituents throughout the Middle East.
Ms. Arraf, President Trump believes he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. What makes him qualified for Nobel?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. We've been talking a lot, mainly about Palestine and Gaza here, but Professor Roth mentioned just some of the things that he is doing domestically, and so many marginalized communities also in the United States are at risk for human rights violations. We've already seen the plans that he is implementing to violate people's human rights, even when it comes to just the right to seek asylum, rounding up immigrants and deporting them or holding them, reopening Guantanamo Bay to house large numbers of immigrants. And this is an affront to people's dignity. He has, laying off people here in the United States. Tens of thousands are losing their jobs in his effort to reduce the federal government. And we see again what we've been talking about. He proposed a war crime and a crime against humanity. So there is nothing that qualifies him for the Nobel Peace Prize. But I must say that the process and the Nobel Peace Prize, because of just the nature of some of the people who have been nominated in the last few years, it is beginning to detract really from the prestige. And I heard even that Elon Musk was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know how much really prestige this prize is going to continue to have if we're making a mockery of it with these nominations in this way. We know it's something that Trump wants, though.
Professor Roth, as Ms. Arraf and you mentioned earlier, U.S. aid is being slashed. Money to UNRWA has stopped. Children in Gaza, and by the way, in Sudan as well, are starving. So how will a Trump Tower on the beaches of Gaza can rescue those children?
Say again, I didn't quite catch the question. How will?
Okay, U.S. aid is being slashed.
Right, yeah, but how will Trump do what?
How the children who are starving right now, not just in Gaza, but also in Sudan, places like Sudan in Africa, they are starving. How will a Trump Tower in Gaza rescue them?
Well, to ask the question is to answer it. There is, simply a grand scheme about the wonders of private enterprise to be able to transform all kinds of conditions. And I'm sure Jared Kushner is waiting in the wings to try to establish a new Riviera in the Gaza Strip. This is the way that Trump thinks as a real estate developer. Obviously, these kinds of measures are quite irrelevant to the humanitarian situation, and the kind of ravings that Trump has made about how everyone's going to want to come to the Gaza Strip and live there. Apparently, oblivious to everything else that's the situation entails. What one would ordinarily dismiss this as an addle-minded set of comments. And yet what we've seen over time is that people have been willing to tolerate these extraordinary statements by Trump over a long period of time, including the latter stages of the campaign, exactly when you would think that he would be on his best behavior trying to win over marginal and undecided voters. But in fact, just his very boldness and the fact that people don't pay attention to the details of what he's saying, but rather are just impressed by the fact that someone could speak in these grandiose terms and defy public opinion of all of those who are resented by his base. That seems to be the key to understanding his ravings. And he hasn't been damaged politically by those ravings in the past, so why not just keep doing it? That's basically what's happening.
When we come back after a short break, I would like to get an explanation from Professor Roth about Mr. Trump's idea that he likes to be president for life. He did say that, like in China. We'll do that after the break.
A car accident can change your life in an instant. As a result of a car accident, you may become unemployed. As a result of a car accident, you may need a lot of medical treatment. People think that insurance companies are on their side. Why? Because they're giving them one or two benefits. Are they giving them all the benefits they deserve? How would one know unless you consult with an attorney? Call the law offices of Rumana Kiruz at 248-557-3645. 248-557-3645.
As the weather gets colder, it's a good idea to layer up with scarves, hats, and mittens. Another layer of protection this season is to get your flu and COVID-19 vaccines. You can get both vaccines at the same time. Talk to your healthcare provider or learn more at michigan.gov/COVID-flu-RSV and layer up for some added peace of mind. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing Mr. Trump's Gaza plan. And I would like Professor Roth to take a minute to explain to us this idea. Mr. Trump likes the idea of president for life, like in China. He once said that. So, under what circumstances can Trump be president for life? A constitutional amendment? Please explain to us.
Well, the Constitution is almost impossible to amend at this point. You would need a kind of consensus that we're very far away from. And so the language, ordinarily the language of the Constitution is something you can read your way around infinitely, but there are certain technical things in the Constitution that are so straightforward that it simply would not pass the laugh test to make a legal claim to the contrary. And even the Supreme Court, which has 3 Trump-appointed judges and is very pliable, as the immunity decision of last year demonstrates, I think would not go with him this way. There is a way in principle that he could come back to the presidency, which would be to have someone like J.D. Vance run for president with him as the vice president, and then have Vance step aside and allow Trump to become president again. I think that that's an extremely far-fetched scenario. The important thing for Trump is to appear not to be a lame duck. He needs to demonstrate that he is firmly in command. It's notoriously difficult for presidents in the latter stages of their presidency, knowing that they cannot be reelected, to have sufficient clout. And so this is a fantasy that he wants to promote. But more than that, he admires openly people like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, and obviously much more so than leaders of democratic countries. And so he has this sense that what America needs is someone like a Xi Jinping, like a Putin, someone who has this enormous concentration of power, who is not hamstrung by dissent and checks and balances in his own state. And so we've seen Trump, repeatedly come back to his admiration for that kind of leadership. And now, of course, he seems to have a freer hand than ever, and is in many ways showing his defiance of every kind of rule. The one rule I don't think he's going to get past, though, is the term limit rule.
Ms. Arraf, Trump is saying 2 conflicting things, and I'm confused. One, he will create jobs by rebuilding Gaza. And 2, he will expel the entire population. So who will get the jobs?
Yeah, that is a good question. And when you listen to him, you'll see that he is not really interested in welfare or creating jobs for the Palestinian people who are there. He is interested in U.S. businesses, corporations, contractors being able to get a windfall from contracts to rebuild, which of course other countries he wants to pay for. I don't think he thought through the practicalities of who will pay for the job. Maybe he thinks a few thousand Palestinians will get to stay and the others will be pushed out. Maybe he is going to get them from Israel. I don't even think he's he's thought through that. The most important thing, I think, to just keep in mind is that he is not thinking about the law. He is not thinking about the welfare of the people. He is only thinking about this in terms of financial gain, in terms of, he's a real estate developer, development and financial gains for himself, for other contractors, for other of his cronies. And, some of your listeners might remember, certainly a year ago, his son-in-law made this very proposal in speaking about Gaza being prime real estate property, and he could see or would favor getting the people out of there and developing the property to make it something like the next Switzerland, or I don't remember what he said. So the practicalities, I don't think he's thought through. I don't think he's concerned with whether Palestinians get jobs or any of the like, and I don't think that we should give him any such credit.
Professor Roth, many Gazans are descendants of Palestinians who were forced out of their homes in 1947, 1948, in what is known as the Nakba catastrophe. Do you expect the Palestinians to warm up to the idea of a second Nakba just because Mr. Trump wants that?
Well, clearly not, and as Ms. Arraf has pointed out, the Palestinians have demonstrated enormous steadfastness on these points over a long period of time. The question is not what people will be warmed up to do. It's what they'll be forced to do, and whether there will be forcible expulsions from the territories. And the problem is that the degrading of respect for international law generally, and the willingness to make bold moves and bold threats in the face of international legal obligations sort of smooths the way for Israel to take all kinds of actions which are in breach of international legal obligations. And so too, the Trump administration's executive order against the ICC demonstrates this all the further. The sin being committed by the ICC is holding Israelis accountable for offenses in respect of the Gaza siege. And so he is going to demonstrate that these institutions could be stared down. If they can be stared down over this, they can be stared down over the deportations of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from wherever to wherever. And this is the serious threat, rather than some of the things that he's been ranting about more specifically.
Ms. Arraf, I have 3 minutes left, and I have two more questions, one for you and a final question for Professor Roth. As a Palestinian-American, please tell me something I would be surprised to hear.
Oh gosh, that's a difficult one, but I'll tell you something you probably wouldn't be surprised to hear, but I think it's something of enormous pride, and that is, how Israeli leaders said that the old will die and the young will forget, as far as Palestinians are concerned, in sort of solidifying their plan to colonize Palestine and get rid of the Palestinians. And what we have seen over the decades, and what we continue to see, is not only that our young haven't forgotten, but they are so tied to Palestine and to seeing justice that their forefathers, that their grandparents haven't seen. And they are at the forefront of uprisings and demonstrations all around the world, and certainly here in the United States. So I am extremely proud of the next generation of Palestinians, and am raising two of them myself. My 10-year-old is fiery and will argue about Palestinian rights with you on anything. And that is something that we should help us feel confident that justice will eventually come. It's much delayed, but it will come to the people of Palestine.
Professor Roth, I have 1 last minute left. And my question is, please tell us what impact the Trump disregard of Geneva Conventions and international law might have on the current world order.
Well, I think a very damaging one. You know, what we've seen is a series of events around the world already that are very much challenging the international legal order, and particularly Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And there has already, of course, been multiple signals on the part of the Trump administration that it is not going to align with natural allies of the United States in the face of the extraordinary violations of all manner of international laws in respect of the Ukraine invasion. This simply, this attitude toward international law simply helps to legitimate what Vladimir Putin is doing, helps to legitimate what Xi Jinping may or may not do in regard to the South China Sea, in regard to Taiwan. It really does augur the erosion, if not the collapse, of the international legal peace and security order, and so it's greatly distressing.
Professor Brad Roth of Wayne State University, thank you very much. And I also thank Ms. Huwaida Arraf, who is a Palestinian-American civil rights attorney. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you again the first Friday next month.